My name's Sebba. I'm a biographer and historian, and my current book is called Les Parisiennes, How the Women of Paris Lived, Loved and Died in the 1940s. I've always been fascinated by this period in history, and especially the defeat of France. And what I found was if you talk to anybody about, well, what did the women do during the war? There was a sort of stock answer. Oh, the women all slept with Germans, didn't they? Collaboration horizontale, that's why they all had their heads shaved. That's the sort of abiding shock image of women in Paris after the war, women in France with their heads shaved, sometimes a swastika tattooed on their foreheads as they were paraded naked. And really, there is another side to that. In fact, there are many more sides to that. So that was really what I wanted to look at, this range of choices facing women and how many women behaved so bravely, how many résistants. Of course, there were collaborators as well, and I talk about that in my book, but I just wanted to explore the choices available to women in fighting a war on the home front, a war without battles, because there's been so much written about the military side of the defeat, the political side of the defeat, but I really felt that exploring the grassroots perspective of war on the home front, how women on a daily basis, particularly in Paris, had to respond in order to stand up to their German occupiers. Wartime fashions for Parisiennes were extraordinary because they were just determined to use what fabrics were available and to make the most of what they could. So one of the images that's very popular is that French women developed the turban. See, shampoo was very difficult to get hold of, so they couldn't wash their hair. There weren't many hairdressers. These were luxuries. So the turban became a fashionable item, and extraordinary big hats were the other things, because even if you couldn't get the materials, you would just put a bird's nest on your head or a vegetable garden. These big, extravagant hats were considered a way of resisting. And the other thing that women developed were culottes, because France had this extraordinary law against trousers. Women in France, it was some ancient Napoleonic law that women were not allowed to wear trousers. Of course, the law could be broken, but the Vichy government really took it upon itself to encourage women to return to the home and hearth, to become mothers. Philippe Pétain drew the conclusion that one of the reasons for the defeat was because women had been so immoral. And so women were almost blamed for the defeat, which is an extraordinary way of looking at what happened to France. So in order to punish women, they were told to stay at home, have lots of children, and they couldn't wear trousers. Now, this was a ridiculous law at a time when you couldn't go around in a car. There wasn't petrol for cars. Private cars barely existed. So the bicycle was the mode of transport, and everybody used a bicycle, and particularly spies and resistant women had to get around in a bicycle. And so they had to develop this fashion of culottes, which really were trousers. They were divided skirts, but they couldn't actually look like trousers. And the bicycle was an essential tool for many of these women, because in their baskets, they might have onions and potatoes on top, but underneath, of course, they'd have guns or political tracts. And there's one lovely story of an SOE woman who was actually arrested, or not arrested, but who was stopped at a checkpoint and asked, could they look inside her basket? They wanted to see what she had. And with complete sang-froid, of course, she was terribly attractive and terribly well-dressed, she flirted with the German soldier at the checkpoint, and she said, "Oh, come on, do you really think I've got a wireless set underneath my onions and vegetables and swedes?" Which, of course, was precisely what she had.